Here's why you are not where you want to be. First and foremost, if you have an ideal life or goals that you haven't achieved yet, bro, I have to say it, but it's entirely your fault, not your family, location, or anything else. If you see this video, you are likely to have a roof on your head, enough money to have a phone, a computer, and access to internet. So stand up for yourself and try to analyze what you did wrong in your life, especially if you are above 25. I don't know exactly where you are in life right now. Maybe you're doing well, maybe you're completely lost. Maybe you're somewhere in between. But I know one thing: most people don't end up in a place they hate because of one massive mistake. It's usually 10 smaller mistakes, mistakes that feel normal when you're making them, mistakes I made myself. And looking back, I can honestly say these mistakes cost me years. So let's start with the first one. Error number one: thinking you have more time than you do. When I was 20, 30 felt incredibly far away. I genuinely believed I had all the time in the world. Whenever I postponed something important, I told myself the same thing: I'll start next year. I'll figure it out later. I still have time. The problem is that later becomes a habit, a dangerous habit. I remember finding an old picture of myself from years earlier. Same room, same desk, same excuses, a different year. That picture hit me harder than I expected, because for the first time I realized time wasn't waiting for me. It had already moved on, and I hadn't. Nobody wakes up and decides to waste 5 years. You waste 5 years, one comfortable day at a time. One postponed decision, one distraction, then one morning you realize you've been planning your future longer than you've actually been building it. Error number two: living through other people's lives. This one is everywhere now. I used to spend hours watching successful people online. Guys making money, guys traveling, guys building businesses, guys living the life I wanted. At first it felt inspiring. Then it became entertainment. Then it became an escape. One evening I checked my screen time and I thought it would say 2 or 3 hours. It said almost seven. 7 hours. An entire workday spent watching other people live. The weirdest part, I felt busy, I felt informed, I felt productive. But nothing in my actual life had changed. I knew more about strangers than I knew about myself. And that's a scary place to be, because eventually you stop being the main character in your own life. You become an audience member. Error number three: waiting until you feel ready. This mistake cost me more time than almost anything else. For years, I thought confidence came before action. I thought successful people started because they felt ready. That's not what happened. I remember wanting to launch my first project. I spent months researching, watching videos, taking notes, making plans, changing plans, and improving plans. Everything except actually starting. The truth was simple: I wasn't preparing, I was hiding. If I never started, I never had to face failure. Eventually, I got tired of waiting, so I started. And guess what? The first version was terrible, then the second version was slightly less terrible. Then things slowly improved, not because I became ready, because I stopped waiting for readiness. Error number four: staying around people who keep you small. This is uncomfortable because these people aren't always bad people. Sometimes they're your friends. Sometimes they're people you've known for years. I remember talking about one of my goals during a night out. I was excited, not arrogant, just excited. The reaction wasn't encouragement, it was laughter, jokes, sarcasm, the kind of comments disguised as humor. So I laughed too. But driving home that night, something felt off. I realized that every time I talked about growth, the people around me got uncomfortable. Not because they hated me, because my ambitions reminded them of their own abandoned ambitions. And honestly, I understood them. I had done the exact same thing before. People who are stuck often prefer company, because if everyone stays in the same place, nobody has to question themselves. One of the saddest things I learned in my 20s is this: not everyone wants to see you fail, but not everyone wants to see you change either. Because the moment you change, you become proof that change was possible for them too. And not everybody wants that reminder. These are only the first four mistakes. The next ones are even more dangerous because most people spend years making them without realizing it. And by the time they finally notice, they've already paid the price. Error number five: choosing comfort over opportunity. This one is subtle, because comfort doesn't look dangerous, it looks safe, reasonable, responsible even. I remember being offered an opportunity that scared the hell out of me. Nothing life-changing on paper, just a chance to do something different, something that might have opened new doors. And my immediate reaction wasn't excitement, it was finding reasons not to do it. What if it doesn't work? What if I embarrass myself? What if it's a waste of time? Looking back, those weren't logical concerns. They were excuses, because comfort has a strange way of disguising itself as intelligence. You convince yourself you're being careful, when really you're just avoiding uncertainty. And the problem is that almost everything worthwhile lives on the other side of uncertainty. The opportunities that changed my life rarely felt comfortable. The comfortable choices rarely changed my life. Error number 6, spending more time consuming than creating. For a long time, my evenings followed the exact same pattern: work, dinner, phone, videos, sleep, repeat. Nothing felt particularly wrong about it. After all, everyone does it. But one night I realized something, and I was spending hours every day consuming content created by people who were spending those same hours creating. That realization bothered me. Because I wasn't lacking information, I wasn't lacking tutorials, I wasn't lacking advice, I was drowning in all three. The truth is that consuming feels productive because it requires no risk. Creating is different. Creating forces you to be judged. Creating exposes your weaknesses. Creating reveals what you actually know, which is exactly why most people avoid it. I certainly did. It felt easier to watch another video than write something, easier to learn another strategy than take action, easier to stay a spectator. Years later, I can honestly say almost every meaningful thing in my life came from creating something imperfect, not consuming something perfect. Most people don't have an information problem, they have an execution problem. They know what they should do. They've watched 50 videos about it, read 10 books about it, saved hundreds of posts about it. The problem isn't knowledge anymore. The problem is that knowing and doing slowly became two separate things. Error number 7, ignoring your physical health. I used to believe this didn't matter. I thought discipline was purely mental, that mindset alone could carry me. Then I spent months sleeping badly, eating badly, moving less. And suddenly everything became harder. My focus dropped, my energy disappeared, my mood got worse. Simple tasks felt exhausting. The weird thing was that I kept searching for complicated explanations. Maybe I lacked motivation. Maybe I needed a new goal. Maybe I was burned out. Sometimes the answer was much simpler. I was treating my body like an afterthought. I remember looking at myself in the mirror one morning, not because I looked terrible, because I looked tired, really tired. The kind of tired that sleep alone doesn't fix. And it hit me that I had spent years trying to improve my life while neglecting the machine responsible for living it. After that, I stopped seeing exercise as a fitness thing. I started seeing it as a life thing. Error number 8, avoiding difficult conversations. I used to avoid confrontation at all costs. If something bothered me, I'd keep it to myself. If someone crossed a line, I'd let it slide. If I needed to say something uncomfortable, I'd postpone it. Tomorrow, next week, another time. The problem is that avoided conversations don't disappear, they accumulate, like debt. And eventually the interest becomes painful. Some of the biggest problems in my 20s existed far longer than necessary because I refused to have one uncomfortable conversation with friends, with family, with employers, sometimes even with myself. Because that's the hardest conversation of all, being honest about what's actually wrong. Not what sounds good, not what protects your ego, what's actually wrong. The conversations you're avoiding today usually become the problems you're dealing with tomorrow. And the longer you wait, the more courage they require. One honest conversation can save years of resentment. One avoided conversation can create years of it. At this point, most people have already recognized themselves in at least one of these mistakes. I know I did. But the final two mistakes were the ones that changed everything for me. Because, unlike the others, they weren't about habits, they were about the way I saw myself. And once I finally understood them, I couldn't unsee them. Error number 9, refusing to take responsibility. This is the mistake that kept me stuck longer than any other. Because as long as something is someone else's fault, there's nothing you can do about it. And for a while, I had an excuse for everything: the economy, my job, my circumstances, my lack of connections, my location, the timing. Something was always standing in my way. At least that's what I told myself. Then one day I had a realization that honestly pissed me off. There were people in worse situations than mine getting better results than me. Not because they were luckier, not because life was easier for them, because they had stopped arguing with reality, they accepted where they were, then they worked from there. I was doing the opposite. I was spending more energy explaining my situation than improving it. And that realization hurt. because it removed my favorite excuse. The moment I started taking responsibility wasn't empowering, it was uncomfortable. It meant admitting that many of my problems had my fingerprints all over them. But strangely enough, that's also when things started changing, because responsibility is heavy, but helplessness is heavier. The day I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And started asking, what can I do about it? Everything changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but for the first time, my energy started moving towards solutions instead of excuses, and that made all the difference. Error number 10: becoming someone you don't respect. This is the biggest mistake of them all, because every other mistake eventually leads here. I don't mean hating yourself, I mean quietly disappointing yourself, knowing what you should be doing, and repeatedly choosing not to do it, making promises to yourself, then breaking them again and again and again until your own word stops meaning anything. I remember reaching a point where my biggest frustration wasn't my results, it was myself. Not because I wasn't successful, because I wasn't being honest. I kept saying I wanted one life while living another. I said I wanted discipline, but chose comfort. I said I wanted freedom, but chose distraction. I said I wanted growth, but avoided discomfort. And eventually I realized something. The problem wasn't that I lacked potential. The problem was that I no longer trusted myself. That's a painful place to be, because when you stop trusting yourself, every goal starts feeling impossible. Not because it is impossible, because deep down you don't believe you'll follow through. Rebuilding that trust took time, and it didn't happen through motivation. It happened through small promises, keeping my word, doing things when I said I would, showing up when nobody was watching, little by little, day by day, until I could finally look at myself without feeling like a fraud. And honestly, that's probably the real reason most people aren't where they want to be. Man, it's not because they're stupid, it's not because they're cursed. It's not because they lack talent. It's because somewhere along the way, they made these 10 mistakes and never noticed the bill was coming due. The good news: you're noticing now, and awareness changes everything. Maybe you saw yourself in one mistake. Maybe you saw yourself in all 10. I know I did. The important thing isn't feeling guilty about the past. The past already got its turn. What's important is what happens after you close this video. Because 1 year from now, you'll either be grateful you listened, or you'll still be telling yourself that you'll start tomorrow. And if there's one thing I've learned from my 20s, tomorrow arrives a lot faster than you think.